Welcome to Misteyre Creations. This was part 4 of a 4-part series on Weird Wisconsin. In this episode, we talk about Michael Persinger's research, our own research, and ghosts, fairies, and other folklore. Please enjoy.
So Wisconsin is a very active fault line. There's about one every 3 years. And that's not to say that, so tectonic strain theory, the idea is it can still happen without an earthquake, but I mean with one earthquake every few years,
That means that it's constantly under pressure enough that as it's moving, it's now is it a subduction or
I think it's the sliding one.
sliding? Okay.
I think.
Okay. Ours one plate is folding in under the other.
That's the big one, yeah.
And-
so the big one is this.
Yeah.
I don't know what the ones east and west of us are.
They're grind. They're like a sliding one.
We have a lot.
There's a lot here, but when you have two plates that are moving like this, there's constant pressure, and as one slips every 3 years, it's gotten to that point that enough friction is built up that it slides a good distance and causes the earthquake. But that whole 3 years, it's moving.
And building
You
pressure.
can have a lot
building
of friction
pressure.
without an earthquake, yeah.
Yeah, and so that whole time, it's creating noises and EMF because it's just sliding along each other. Now, in Wisconsin, there's a lot of quartz crystal in the ground.
There's a lot of quartzite.
Quartzite.
Yeah, there's a lot, particularly around Devil's Lake and like in the Driftless, I believe there's quite a bit of quartzite. Now, quartz, the cool looking crystal quartz, I don't think we have much of that.
Okay.
But we do have the quartzite.
Do you have, 'cause I've never been to Lake Michigan on the Wisconsin side. Do you guys have the quartz silicone dunes there?
To the best of my knowledge, which may not be that great, but I don't believe so. I do
Okay.
not think so, no.
Now,
Our Lake Michigan around here at least comes right up to, like, you're in the city, you know what I mean? It's like right up to, the land.
okay. Quartzite and quartz crystals, when you rub them together, they create heat and friction and light.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of that, when it slips, you have a huge amount of quartzite in the ground. It's going to create little spark lights along that fault line. And so people might see the reflection of that light if it's in like an area that's open to the air.
Mm-hmm.
So you could see the earthquake lights. And
Oh yes, I'm sure that's happened.
And where it creates heat, it could light something on fire, and then you have fires. And because I watched an experiment where this guy rubbed them together and he was able to start a fire with them. Two quartz crystals.
Yeah, I haven't had time to do research, but I kept thinking about the traditional way of trying to start a forest fire is knocking two rocks together. So I actually wanted to do research on fault lines and forest fires.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's That's an interesting idea. I had never heard of that before, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's creating heat, it's creating sparks that would seem to lead naturally to forest fires. Yeah, at least,
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
And
Especially here, we have sleeping fires. So our fires are actually underground.
Oh,
They,
wow.
if we don't get enough snow and rain, they actually stay lit in the undergrowth. And as soon as it's dry, it pops back up. So if it's in deep in the undergrowth and next to the fault line,
right there, that's fuel to the fire, so to speak.
Mhm.
it's just a theory. I have to do research, but I had a thought.
It would certainly stand to reason. I mean, that makes sense that that would be tinder, and then you have your sparks, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Now, when you look at UFO sightings and that sort of thing, when these fault lines rub together, creating EMF, and then sparks and lights, and booming sounds, UFOs, all of that is because when you see the lights giving it, when when the quartz crystal gives off the light, it they're rubbing together. You see a red outer glow, yellow inner tones that light up and flash, and then a white hot center where the heat is being generated. And the more they rub together, like if say the fault line is slipping and moving up slightly, you'll end up with sparks coming off that way, and they would fly like flares
Oh, wow.
because parts of the crystal will break off, and it'll be white hot flying off.
Wow.
And when you think of it, a lot of UFO sightings are of them flying so fast through the sky, and they make weird uh uh spins and whatnot that
Mhm.
are like high G. But if a piece of quartz splits off, sometimes it splinters like shale, and it's like paper thin, and so it'll float in the air a bit as
Wow.
it's coming down, and then it'll disappear.
That's a cool experiment.
It-
Gotta try that one day.
That would explain a chunk of sightings. Yeah, that is really interesting.
So there's a lot to plate tectonics that
Mhm.
hasn't been experimented on, that hasn't been.
Because they're afraid of the woo-woo.
They're afraid of the woo part of it. But the thing is, if it's EMF affecting the brains of the people that are close enough to see the phenomena, 90% of it will be the EMF causing their brains to see things differently. And it could be that they're actually seeing these objects without the filter of what the brain normally filters out. And like,
Yeah, so maybe opening something up. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
So for me, because I'm uh neurally divergent, because of past experiences, my filters aren't right, which allows me to see things. But not only that, I was born blind. I was so severely cross-eyed when I was born that I saw my actual eye, the iris part of my eyes were in my skull.
Oh,
And so I
wow.
was seeing the world through the side of my eyes for the first 17 months of my
You know
life.
what's kind of interesting about that?
Well,
We have infrared rods in the side of our eyes, which was really funny. Vesta's a member of the Liminal Lodge.
mm,
I like to figure out because she sees things out of the corner eyes, and I got to tell her they may not be just your eyes tricking you. They might really be there.
You might be seeing an infrared. you
Yeah,
know,
well,
yeah, something happening in the regular world in infrared. Yeah.
yeah, and when you look at infrared, um, I've experienced this overseas where you'd see shadows in the desert and in mountainous regions in the infrared goggles that we used.
Yes. Yes.
That being said, when we were using them, they weren't as sophisticated as the newer ones. The
Mhm.
newer ones filter out a lot more than the older ones did. And so you'd see things moving in the desert that you wouldn't be able to see with your naked eyes. And it would be at dusk when the light's low enough that you can use the infrared without screwing up your eyes in the process. And you'd be able to see where you're seeing these objects moving. And you'd see it there, and there was nothing there that we could see with our naked eye.
That is fascinating.
Those stories creep me out the most. I remember I listened to one and the guy said, "You see so much moving in the desert that you ignore it if it's not humanoid shape." And I was like, "Oh my God, that is absolutely terrifying."
But there's much more life in the desert than we think there is. We think it's dead, but it's really teeming with life.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And it's just a weird place. It's a totally different vibe than, other places that, the desert's kind of a unique environment. And it's always been kind of a place where strange things happen, kind of like universally. Just just riffing here, but I'm thinking of that passage in the Bible where it says that when demons cast out, it goes out into the desert. And think of how many important spiritual encounters in all the different religions have happened in the desert. And like it's a lot, and there's just a unique desert vibe there that I I don't know what causes that, but it's a weird place. Yeah.
It is, and we have like an ancient connection to the desert too. Like Enki, who you can track. I'm kind of doing this big project. I haven't started taking notes, but like I've been able to track Enki as the horn god, Pashupati, Cernunnos, Owanis.
Almost,
Like
possibly Odin.
but I think Odin's an evolved
It's an
form.
evolved form, yeah.
And he may also be Saint Michael, or
Angel.
Angel Michael, but he is originally from the desert.
Yeah, he was a desert, but he's a water deity.
Oh,
But the thing is, in the Anunnaki kind of history, it is very confusing to find anything that's coherent. You have to read everything to find the bits and pieces that make a whole view of what Enki is. Enki was one of the key ingredients to humanity learning language and learning
Well, he was
to live
at
with
our creation,
Yeah.
and he allowed us to be created. And in one of the versions, because Sumerian myth depends on who translated it, and one's translation says we are actually products of his closest friend that was killed so we could be created.
And then
wow.
other aspects of it is the Anunnaki killed Namu or Tiamat if you go into the Babylonian Assyrian myths. They killed Tiamat, who gave birth to the universe using the waters of Absu. And Absu is the underground lake on Earth.
It's the
Is
waters of life.
The waters
It's
of life.
underground.
Yeah.
And Enki, depending on again the translation, he either put Abzu as a creature he put to sleep and now guards over, or
Killed it.
he killed a creature and has taken the horns and guards over it now.
Now, we went from science to spirituality.
Oh, it's because it's all connected.
In the
As
same,
much as scientists want to argue that, it's all connected.
see,
Mm.
when I say I look at magic differently than other people, I look at it as energy. Magic is energy, the energy of everything. And what we call magic, that magic that we perform, that is manipulating that energy. Some people think it's more you're manipulating probability to make something happen,
Mhm.
but that energy is in everything, is part of everything. That's what makes up life. It's the, if you want to look at it scientifically, it's the energy of the universe that's inherent in all of the universe. Dark matter has gone through the entire universe now. In the beginning, it was hardly like, it grew over time. From the beginning on, and they're finding that it's spider webbed throughout everything, and everything's attached to it. So it's like
Wow.
there's it's like a mycelium network of energy throughout the universe that expanded after the Big Bang. But they've seen that multiple Big Bangs happen, not just one.
They theorized.
They theorize that, but they've been able to prove it because they can, that they're able to get further back in time to closer. They're really close to the first Big Bang in data, but the ability to surmise what actually happened, they're trying to weed out that, and they're finding new stuff every day. When you look at science, we wouldn't have science if we didn't have magicians who alchemists who were trying to figure out a way of explaining what they were seeing. And that's why we have physics now, because, well, even Newton, he was an alchemist.
Oh,
He has
yes.
alchemist notes that everyone tries to discount and say, oh no, he wasn't, he was a scientist. But we wouldn't have,
If I can butt in for 1 second,
Yeah.
like back in the 1900s, John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist, bought Isaac Newton's personal papers and was blown away to find how much magical, esoteric things he was into. And he said he was not the first of the scientists, he was the last of the magicians. And I mean, he obviously wasn't the last, but the scientific revolution would be impossible without the magicians who came before that. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, when you look at like any quantum mechanics of any kind, it's all a little bit woo-woo, especially when you get into quantum information, which I barely am understanding it, so I couldn't repeat any of it. But like when I was reading it, it's really theoretically out there, and just like when the guy is explaining it very scientifically, and I'm like, this just sounds like magic. Like,
it does.
The entanglement where distance doesn't make any difference. Yeah.
Well,
or the fact that we exist in two states, and because we're like, I'm observing you right now, so I'm forcing you to exist in this state. Sounds like paranormal to me.
yeah.
Well, that's That's why the Mandela effect, which I hate the term, but it's what's used. 'Cause I don't think it ever actually affected Nelson Mandela. But the Mandela effect never affects things that are watched all the time. It affects all the peripheral little things that people don't really watch constantly. So there's no observer effect. And then it changes. And then stuff that you totally remember never happened. And yeah, it's there's a lot we don't understand. There's a lot.
I actually experienced the Mandela effect because I grew up being told you could go into the torch at the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
And you can't. It's been closed for like 100 years or more.
Oh,
And when
gee.
I was growing up,
I guess I experienced it too then. I always thought you could go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I was growing up, my teachers talked about it all the time, going up into the torch, and apparently that was never a thing.
Well, have you heard about the word dilemma?
Dilemma?
Uh-huh. And the silent N? Like DILEMMA is the way it's spelled.
Right.
But I had to remember that. I had to memorize this as a spelling word in school, that it was DILEMNA. There's a silent N in there. And a whole bunch of people remember that, like millions. I was talking about it with my doctor, and she totally freaked out because she had to remember that too. And we had to talk about something else because it was really bothering her because she remembered having to remember dilemma with the silent N.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense that we'd be memorizing a misspelling. But if you go back, it's not an alternative spelling. It's not a British spelling. It's not something that used to exist and was changed. No, there's no history of it at all. It never happened. But I remember it happening, and yeah, I've got those. The Fruit of the Loom t-shirts,
Yeah.
the logo of Fruit of the Loom, I know that used to have a cornucopia, a horn of plenty on it.
Yeah.
But it never did. There's no record that ever happened. But I
remember
totally
that
remember
too?
that.
It sounds vaguely familiar, yeah.
And my daughter was like asking me about that. She's like, how did I know what a cornucopia was? I asked you what was on your shirt, and you explained what a cornucopia is. And now there was never a cornucopia. And I totally remember a cornucopia, but my wife saw the Genie movie, Shazam,
Yeah.
with the comedian Sinbad.
Sinbad.
And
It wasn't Sinbad.
What's that?
It wasn't Sinbad.
That's what they say.
I grew up with that movie. See, I'm on the Sinbad train.
And not Kazam with Shaq.
Was
totally
actually
different.
the basketball player.
That was a similar but different movie called Kazam with Shaquille O'Neal. Yeah.
Yeah.
But people remember a totally different movie that Sinbad says he never was part of. And my wife insists she saw it. My daughter insists she saw it. And my wife happens to be from the little area in Michigan where Sinbad's from. And so like he's a big deal there. And she would totally know that it was him and not, it's not Shaq. They look totally different.
Yeah.
And people have seen this movie. Sinbad says he was never in anything like that at all.
See,
but people remember it totally.
I remember watching that movie, and it was Sinbad.
Yeah,
there's no way. Like,
I don't know what's causing the Mandela effect, and I don't want to be those conspiracy theorists that say it's is it the Hadron Collider or the
CERN, we're in Switzerland.
Yeah, I don't want to be one of those people, but it's definitely like people are mentioning it, and it's like it's a lot of people remembering it for it to be false memory.
But see, this is where science comes in to explain something of that. We now know there's no evidence that we can speak of we know that there's a multiverse, but we don't have any evidence of multiple dimensions. Now, but if you look at it, there's literally trillions of universes bouncing around each other out there. They say that they're all going away from each other from the Big Bang out. But when you look at the curvature of space, it eventually comes back on itself. It's like a globular shape. It's not round or anything like like the Earth is.
Or the universal
the-
egg.
or the
perhaps.
universal egg, yeah. And when you have that, I call it the universal ball of yarn that connects basically. If you look at the web of dark matter, that connects kind of like a big ball of yarn. It's just like a web spider web of yarn that
Well, it's
wraps around
interesting
itself.
that you called it mycelium network, because now we're finding that the mycelium network's a very important part of life here.
Yeah. But
Wow.
when you look at it, maybe there's an energy that we don't have any way of fathoming at this point, or there is a way of fathoming it. We're just so far in to our we're just in our infancy of learning everything that's out there. That there could be connections to other universes, because our atoms can exist here and elsewhere in the universe, or in another universe, who knows. And if we're connected with that energy somehow, like there's scientists who are studying universal consciousness now, and it's quantum
Rupert
physics.
Sheldrake.
Sheldrake, but he people call his work pseudoscience. They don't call it science. They say, "Oh, that's pseudoscience."
They do
It's
the
so
same
not-
thing about Michael Persinger, even though he did it in a lab.
He did it in a lab, and he proved his point multiple times. So if you can prove something, that means it's real.
Yeah.
And
There's
so
a lot of preconceptions that, people are holding on to very tightly because, it supports their worldview, and they don't want anything unknown out there that, disrupts that. The materialist reductionist position
yeah,
is very comforting for a lot of people, in the sciences. And they're not going to look beyond that.
yeah, and so if you suddenly went to them and said, "Okay, you exist here, but you also exist on trillions of other worlds throughout multiple universes," what would that do to their psyche? That would just it would go beyond blowing their mind. Their mind wouldn't be able to comprehend it, and they just it's like when the indigenous people saw tall ships for the first time. They didn't see them. They couldn't fathom what they were, and so their brains filtered it out, and they saw nothing until the boat suddenly appeared in front of them, and they were. It took a while for their brains to communicate with the Europeans to figure out what the hell that thing is. So
Kind of like a UFO experience sometimes.
yeah,
Mhm.
and well,
Oh
airships.
yeah,
The
that's a
original
fascinating thing.
UFOs were airships.
Yeah, and they saw them in Milwaukee.
Oh yeah.
And when I was reading the article about it, they theorized that they called them airships because that is the only frame of reference that they had for it. But like the one witness says, 4 bright stars put together, flashing the colors of red, white, and green, which sounds like a lot of common UFO sightings here.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, the whole airship thing, really quite a rabbit hole I'm going to have to dive down, because it's so weird, because the technology for like blimps, zeppelins, was going to come out, but it wasn't here then. And the stuff that people report is so weird. And yeah, what to make of that. I really don't know. It was very interesting.
Now think of it. If there is a connection to other universes somehow, and we have overlap of seeing these things, there could be other universes that are more advanced or less advanced than we are.
Well, yeah.
And so that runs the gambit, and with us using nuclear weapons and nuclear technologies that in the beginning we didn't really understand, we could have opened doorways without knowing what we were doing, like the Russian
Oh, yeah,
underground
so
experiment that freaked them out.
this is not a story that can ever be verified because it was a Soviet era scientist. So like if there were documents to back them up, they're probably long destroyed. But he says when they started using mines, deep mines, to test nuclear weapons, they let off the mine and he was standing like on a ledge or in the mine somewhere. He said the mine around him faded away and he looked over at his fellow scientists and they were floating in air. And then all of a sudden it snapped back.
Wow. Wow. That is very interesting.
Completely
I hadn't heard this-
unverifiable, but it
Oh,
fascinating.
of course, yeah, you can't, yeah. I have heard a lot of speculation that when the US set off the Trinity bomb as just a test, that it blew a hole in, interdimensionally, and that kind of changed everything. And maybe led to the 1940s and 50s and 60s contactees being really obsessed with you don't want to use nuclear weapons. You really don't even want to use nuclear energy. Because it has, it's bad effects. We don't want you to do that. And that was just a recurrent theme in all the contactee stuff. And maybe that was why, because it had effects beyond our dimension. And I take that pretty seriously as a real possibility. It's interesting.
We should talk about at least one more thing that is
I was
just
going to ask you just on time.
Yeah.
Eventually I'm going to have to
Yeah,
clear out here, but
so there was
So like
one
10:30
more
time.
like fascinating thing I didn't know about, and so Milwaukee angel hair. So October 1881 in Milwaukee and other nearby towns, a weird spiderweb like substance floated in from the direction of Lake Michigan. They were sized as small specks to 60 feet long. The interesting thing is it was from Lake Michigan, which is huge UFO territory.
Oh, yes.
And it happens all over. Like there's all kinds of UFO sightings and then angel hair. And it's frustrating because I'm reading this and I'm thinking about modern UFO sightings. You never hear about that. So I'm really
Mhm.
wondering if it's happening more often. All of the other reports I have are from Germany, England, Brazil, Alabama, Ontario, France, and Montreal. But it's an old book, so it's all like 70s. It'd be interesting to know if more sightings of angel hair around UFOs happen. And I don't
That is
believe it's
very
spiders because I
It's
lived in
not spider.
Indiana and I've never heard of it. I lived in Nova Scotia where we have big spiders, never heard of it. We have spiders here that build these huge nests on bushes, still never heard of it.
See,
And it wouldn't show up just,
yeah.
and no,
And it
I
wouldn't
can't
be
believe that that's
significant
spiders.
enough to be like
That-
60 meters long.
That would have to be a hell of an infestation to affect Milwaukee and other towns, because Milwaukee's a huge city.
Yeah.
So you have this huge city and then little towns nearby. So that would be a lot of spiders.
I honestly, I can't imagine that happening and being spiders. It's gotta be something else, because
Yeah.
we just don't have spiders like that, you know? No, that's, I don't, we don't have that, you know? And it wouldn't show up all at once, you know what I mean? If the spiders were given like 6 months, maybe they could make something like that, but it wouldn't just come down from the sky, you know? And so I don't know what that is, but I have heard of it, and I've heard it a lot of places, as you mentioned. But it doesn't seem like it happens, at least it doesn't get reported anymore. I don't know if it's still happening. I don't think they've ever like analyzed it and found much of anything, you know?
They're saying it breaks up easily or becomes so small that you don't know it's there. That's what the book was saying in the reports.
See,
It almost seems to me like kind of a fae type of thing, or an apport, where you have an object and then it just like disintegrates or rots away really quickly, and you can't ever really get anything out of it. I don't know,
sounds
very
very,
strange.
yeah.
It's so strange. And like now when I have so many UFO books to go through. So now I'm going to be looking for that.
Well, talking about apportations, Sarah lost her wedding ring in the house.
Oh yeah.
It just disappeared.
So you have to have context.
Yeah.
So we opened the altar
Yeah.
shortly after I lost my 10-year anniversary ring, and like we pulled the bookshelf back. We looked through every inch, like gone, just gone. And I was so upset, but it was just our 10-year anniversary ring. It wasn't our expensive actual wedding rings. And then a year to the day, I walked into the bedroom and it was just sitting on the bookshelf.
Wow.
It was just
Wow, that is amazing. I would be totally shocked, except we experienced a lot of that at not the house we're in now, but the previous house. A whole lot of disappearing things, and they reappeared in a place you'd already looked multiple times. And then now it's back. And it led to me putting certain small objects in a lockbox just so I could have them. One of the funniest ones was the pepper, like, you know, the black pepper seasoning. That seemed to disappear incessantly. And I'd be like cooking something, and I'd reach over for the pepper and it's gone. I'd look around and look around and look around, and it's back in a place I've already looked at 3 times. And the pepper ended up in the lockbox just so I could have pepper. You know? And there was a really weird experience. My wife didn't lose the ring. She had the engagement ring, but there was a little stone in it. And the stone was taken out of the ring and then turned up in our bed in the sheets, just a stone. And the ring wasn't on her finger because her hands swell sometimes.
Yeah.
So she'd taken it off just for comfort. And she had the ring, but the stone was gone. And the stone shows up in the sheets. And it's like, what's going on here?
Weird, because they wouldn't just fall off like that either.
It wouldn't.
It almost like had to be extracted.
Yeah, it would
And-
have to be pulled out of the ring, because the way jewelers do it, they bend the tongs over, but they also glue it in with super glue. So there's even if it comes loose, it's gonna stay in its mounting unless somehow that gets, you have to pry it open to get the stone out.
Yes. I got to a point where had a little self-made ritual that I'd do, or I just go in the other room and, you know, it'd be really great if we could have this item back. And frequently it was back, you know, like instantly or within a minute or two. Not always, but frequently. And then I'd say, well, that's really great. We really appreciate that. And go on. But it was a very strange time.
That sounds like the Fae to me.
And I didn't want to engage too hard. I just kind of wanted this to kind of, you know, not happen. I wonder what would have happened if I'd laid out like that word game, Scrabble. Scrabble pieces. I wonder if it would have formed something. I don't know. I wasn't pushing it that far.
This was the final episode of Season 3. Thank you, Vincent, for ringing in the end of Season 3 with us. It was great. We have further episodes in our streaming service, www.parasortium.com. Only $12.99 a year, so less than a meal deal from McDonald's. You get early access to episodes, live streams, and access to our community forums. Please like, follow, and subscribe, whatever platform you're watching us on.